John looks so lonely there. I think there's somebody else I can't.
I'm okay with that. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Madam Administrator, we are going to begin. Good morning. I would like to call the Tuesday, January 23rd, 2024 committee meeting of the Legislative Regulation Review Committee to order. It is officially 11:02 a.m. Would my co-chair like to make any remarks before we begin?
Good morning, everyone. Sorry I'm not there in person. I'm just traveling right now. But it's wonderful to see everybody, and I think we should get the meeting underway. This is our last meeting before the start of the 2024 legislative session. So things are gearing up for everybody. So thank you for coming and working on today's business.
Thank you so much, Chairman Dathan, and in honor of the fact that this is the last meeting before we start the session, our meeting room is a balmy, at least 80 degrees this morning. Super comfortable, or maybe too hot for some of our colleagues. Senator Austin says it's horrible, but I'd rather have it hot than cold. Ranking members, would you like to add anything? Either of our ranking members?
Nope, just looking forward to getting the work started and seeing everyone up in session soon.
Senator Maroney, I'm looking forward to seeing you in person and working closely with you in general law. Is Representative Carpino with us, our ranking member from the House Republican Caucus?
I am. Thank you, Senator. It's just nice to see everyone. I know things are starting to gear up and folks are already pretty busy, so I appreciate everybody making the time today.
Thank you so much, Representative Carpino. Madam Administrator, would you please administer a quorum call?
Representative Dathan,
Here.
Senator Kissel,
Here.
Representative Carpino,
Here.
Senator Maroney,
Here.
Representative Claire Destetria, Representative Arnone, Representative Godfrey,
Here.
Senator Hartley,
Here.
Senator Kelly, Representative McGuirty,
Here.
Senator Austin,
Here.
Representative Ryan,
Here.
Representative Fishbein,
Here.
Senator Ciccarella. We have a quorum.
Thank you very much, Madam Administrator. Okay, we will start with proposed regulation 2023-029 from the Department of Consumer Protection, swimming pool builders and contractors. I would entertain a motion to accept the LCO recommendation of approval in whole with technical corrections and substitute pages.
So moved.
Second. Second.
So that was moved by, was that Chairman Dathan?
Yes.
And seconded by Representative Godfrey. Is there any discussion regarding this regulation? Any discussion? Okay, hearing none, Madam Administrator, would you please call the roll?
For proposed regulation 2023-029 from the Department of Consumer Protection regarding swimming pool builders and contractors CE, we're entertaining a motion to accept the LCO recommendation of approval in whole with technical corrections and substitute pages. Representative Dathan.
Yes.
Senator Kissel.
Yes.
Representative Carpino.
Yes.
Senator Maroney.
Yes.
One more time for video.
Maroney votes yes.
Representative Arnone. Senator Ciccarella. Representative Fishbein.
Representative Fishbein votes yes.
Representative Godfrey.
Representative Godfrey votes yes.
Senator Hartley.
Yes,
One more time for video.
yes, in the affirmative.
Thank you. Senator Kelly.
Yes.
Representative Claire DeStitria. Representative McGordy.
Representative McGordy, yes.
Senator Austin.
Senator Austin votes in the affirmative.
Representative Ryan.
Representative Ryan votes yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Administrator. Next, we have proposed regulation 2023-030 from the Department of Consumer Protection, liquor control, seating, and bathrooms. I would entertain a motion to accept the LCO recommendation of approval in whole with technical corrections.
So move.
Moved by Representative Godfrey. Is there a second?
Second, Representative Dathan.
Actually, you were beaten by Senator Kelly.
Excellent.
So it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. Madam Administrator, would you please call the roll?
For proposed regulation 2023-030 from the Department of Consumer Protection regarding liquor control seating and bathrooms, we're entertaining a motion to accept LCO's recommendation of approval in whole with technical corrections. Representative Dathan.
Yes.
Senator Kissel.
Yes.
Representative Carpino.
Yes.
Senator Maroney.
Maroney votes yes.
One more time, sir.
Maroney votes yes.
Thank you. Representative Arnone. Senator Ciccarella. Representative Fishbein.
Representative Fishbein votes yes.
Representative Godfrey.
Representative Godfrey votes yes.
Senator Hartley.
Senator Hartley, yes.
Senator Kelly.
Yes.
Representative Claire DeStitria. Representative McGordy.
Representative McGordy, yes.
Senator Austin.
Senator Austin votes in the affirmative.
Representative Ryan.
Representative Ryan votes yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Administrator. And finally, colleagues, next we have proposed regulation 2023-031 from the Department of Housing entitled Fair Housing Regulations. And I would entertain a motion to accept the LCO recommendation of rejection without prejudice. Is there a motion?
So move.
Moved by Representative Godfrey. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Representative Fishbein. Just because this LCO recommendation is a rejection without prejudice, if our LCO could just explain why that recommendation is being made, just to inform the members of the committee if they had any questions.
Hello, Shannon McCarthy, LCO. There are
Nice and loud, please.
Shannon McCarthy, LCO. There are 25 substantive concerns. The general theme, I think, is a lack of using the active voice. So sometimes it's not clear who had the responsibility for certain provisions. There's also a lack of certain definitions, the way that terms are being used. Sometimes terms are used inconsistently. And just certain provisions we weren't clear on the intent of the agency, and also there were a couple where it appeared that there might be a conflict with statutory provisions.
Thank you. And just so members of the committee are aware, the leadership of this committee did discuss this with LCO. The notion that perhaps the department would withdraw this and rework it, but they chose not to. So we're hoping that this will be an expeditious process, even though it's being proposed to be rejected today without prejudice, that it'll come back before us in a timely manner. If there's anybody else have any questions? Any members of the committee? Okay, seeing none, Madam Administrator, if you could please call the roll.
For proposed regulation 2023-031 from the Department of Housing regarding fair housing regulations, we are entertaining a motion to accept the LCO recommendation of rejection without prejudice. Representative Dathan,
Representative Dayton votes yes.
Senator Kissel,
Yes?
Representative Carpino,
Yes.
Senator Maroney,
Maroney votes yes.
Representative Arnone, Senator Ciccarella, Representative Fishbein,
Representative Fishbein votes yes.
Representative Godfrey,
And Representative Godfrey votes yes.
Senator Hartley,
Senator Hartley, yes.
Senator Kelly,
Yes.
Representative Claire DeStitria, Representative McGorty,
Representative McGorty, yes.
Senator Austin,
Senator Austin votes in the affirmative.
Representative Ryan.
Representative Ryan votes yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Administrator. That concludes our business for
If I-
today. I'm sorry.
Senator Kissel, before you conclude, I have a couple questions.
Oh, by all means. Plus, I was going to ask if our administrator could check to see if anybody missed any votes, but by all means, Senator Austin.
Thank you. This would be for the two co-chairs of the committee. Over the last couple of months, we've been looking at the regulations, and a number of people have had some concerns relative to fiscal notes and whether or not legislative intent is included. And in some cases, people are saying that the Regs Review Committee does not have the authority under the Constitution of the state of Connecticut to vote against a rule or regulation. And so I wanted to know if the two of you have looked at these. We have alluded to these discussions as we've been moving through on this issue. And I want to make it pretty clear that one, no one in this committee is required to vote for anything, to pass a regulation that we have. We have to make sure that the regulation has been fully vetted. We have to make sure that when in my read of the Constitution and the rules, it says that we can approve, we can reject without prejudice, so we can reject. We don't have to approve a regulation, number one. At least that's my read. And I want to make sure that the committee is understanding what the expectations are of all of us that sit on this committee. The other thing is relative to fiscal notes. We had two fiscal notes that were done by the Office of Fiscal Analysis, and I'm not certain that the agencies understand the import all the time of fiscal notes. And two of the fiscal notes were off by $123 million and $143 million. So I want to make sure that we're getting fiscal notes that fit into the context of the budget that we have. And if the fiscal note goes beyond the context of the budget, that there has to be a way for that to be pushed back to the agency for that particular reason, and make sure they understand the import, that they're not just giving us a fiscal note for their agency, they're giving us a fiscal note for the state of Connecticut. And that is not what's happened. And then lastly, my understanding is that we would always include legislative intent to explain what we were trying to, what we were trying to get done on a particular piece of legislation. But if legislative intent is immaterial, then I think that we need to step back and make sure that we are writing a bill as it should be written, with the intention that we want it to. Not that we're not saying all we have to do is explain it away in legislative intent and not worry about the detail of the language of a bill. So I didn't know if the two of you were considering putting in legislation to, or changes to the policies of this committee that would look at these three very important issues and state them for the record for what they are. And if I'm wrong in the assessment of what they are, then I think that we also need to know that too. I don't believe I'm wrong, but I really think that these are things that are of import. I consider this committee one of the most important committees, and I appreciate all the work that's done by our partners in the fifth floor LCOs and OLR and OFA, but I think that we set everybody up, not only ourselves, but we set up our partners upstairs to make a recommendation on a bill that we explained away in legislative intent. And I'm not convinced that this isn't something that this committee should be looking at very seriously. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Austin, and I'll take a crack at it first, and then I'll defer to my co-chair. And essentially, Senator, I very much appreciate that, and that was essentially 3 lines of inquiry rolled into one. So let me address it as best I can. The first one is I'm going to go to the second point that you raised regarding fiscal notes. Just recently, and in fact, during the meeting that was sort of the focus of that meeting were the electric vehicle proposed regulations that were ultimately withdrawn by the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. But during that same meeting, there was another proposal regarding staffing at nursing homes that had been brought forward by the Department of Public Health. And the co-chairs and ranking members and other folks on this committee had some concerns. We had meetings with the Department of Public Health. And when the fiscal analysis was done, it seemed to be merely focused on the impact to the Department of Public Health rather than, as you very pointedly and astutely pointed out, the total impact to the state budget, because the other avenue of cost was the Department of Social Services. And so when the analysis was done, the cost to the Department of Social Services wasn't included in the analysis. And that was the lion's share of the impact of that proposed regulation. It seemed to just not get the attention that it deserved. And ultimately, the Department of Public Health eventually did withdraw that as well. And we are contemplating proposed legislation regarding some of these things, and I'm going to defer to Chairman Dathan on that. The second issue that you raised, which was your third point, had to do with legislative history. In my years here in the legislature, which as of February 23rd, it'll be going into my 32nd year, I've had opportunity in my capacity as an attorney to sometimes do research on bills, especially regarding their impact in court cases. And I am amazed. It seems to be an ebb and flow, but clearly judges cite legislative history as to meaning of bills going forward. And just Google, not Google, but look up in LexisNexis or whatever database regarding the statutes you'd like to. And if you put in your name, you'll be surprised one of your floor speeches or remarks in a committee level will come forward if it's being cited by a judge. I know that we as a legislature over these last 3 decades have striven mightily to say it's the plain language of the statute. It should speak for itself. You know, may shouldn't mean shall shouldn't mean may. And we've made great strides, even passing legislation that says we mean what we say and we say what we mean. None nonetheless, I have found that our intentions as articulated in the various chambers and committee meetings is cited quite often, more than you might believe, by judges that are scrambling to try to figure out what did the legislature really mean, especially if there seems to be some ambiguity. And that can be raised because you have two dedicated litigants arguing as to what the impact of our words actually means. As to the first point that you raised, do we have legislative ideas that we're going to propose to clarify some of these things? And also, and I want to thank Representative Godfrey for early on making it very clear. This committee is a committee that is a creature of statute, has constitutional ramifications, but we are unlike all the other committees in this building. And that's why we have certain rules that we follow. That's why we have to have a quorum. That's why we can't leave votes open till 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So at this time, I'd like to defer either to our LCO attorneys or to Chairman Dathan regarding the ideas that we have to put forward to the legislature. We had one last year. Unfortunately, it didn't go anywhere. It was in GAE. But we're hoping to double down on clarifying some of these issues that we've bumped into along the lines of what Senator Austin has articulated. So Chairman Dathan, I'm sure that you'd like to add to answering some of these concerns that have been raised by Senator Austin.
Thank you very much, Chairman. And I just wanted to thank the senator for raising these points. These are very important and very valid points of things that we need to be considering. I know for me, with my finance background, it's not just a departmental thing. It is, our overall state budget that we need to be conscientious about when we're looking at these regulations. So, in fact, we are looking at legislation about this and working on some ideas, particularly around sort of some of the history things as well as sort of the fiscal issues. But I think Chairman Kissel did a very good job kind of summarizing this and his experience. So thank you very much. And I'll defer to LCO if they want to chime in.
And at this time, LCO, if you'd like to add to respond to Senator Austin's well-noted concerns. And essentially, there were 3 areas that she had questions regarding.
Nick Bombase, LCO. I'm not sure if you have any specific questions. I think you both handled those pretty well, but if there's any clarification you would like from us, happy to entertain any other questions.
I don't know if I think you expressed your concerns very well, Senator Austin, but if you have any specific inquiries of LCO, I do know that when we were grappling with the issue regarding electric vehicles, not only did LCO research what possible responses could be made by this committee, but I know that individual caucuses marshaled the resources they had in their own council staffs as to what we could do or not do in response to a regulation that some of us had concerns with. But again, LCO, and the other thing that I'll point out is this Friday, I believe at 1 o'clock, our staff is making a presentation to the various agencies as to how to go about creating their proposed regulations, trying to give them guidance. And it's my intention to learn from that presentation this Friday as well. Everybody is invited to attend, I believe, via Zoom. And we just think that going over that again will be healthy for everybody involved. But again, if you could specifically respond to Senator Austin regarding our proposals, that would be helpful.
So, Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
if I could just interrupt for a second. I'm not really asking for an opinion from our council right now. What I'm trying to figure out is, as a body, you alluded to coming forth with a couple of pieces of legislation. And I think as a body, all of us should be able to see that legislation and comment on that legislation amongst us, because I think that because they do great work, and I'm not, the questions that I have are, how are we as a group of 14 going to deal with the issues of whether or not we're just a rubber stamp for regulations, or we have the authority to vote our conscience or what we really believe is going on. Whether we have this, we are going to approve regulations even though the fiscal notes are erroneous. And lastly, if legislative intent is not part of the clear message, I think we need to make sure that the rest of the legislature knows that we're not going to go back and look at legislative intent. We're going to look at the language of the bill itself and not bring in legislative intent. And I agree with you, over 30 plus years, the plain language is what we're going by. But I know many people who say, I'm explaining what I mean by this by legislative intent. And that is really, if we are subjecting ourselves to just the plain language, then we need to make sure that we're not also falling into that bad habit of sloppy bill writing, so that we are paying attention to how we're doing it and that we actually are writing what we mean. You're right, shall, may are big differences, but it's more than that. You know, I think that that's something that we really have to look at. So you've got a bunch of other colleagues that are interested in commenting, and so if you and Chairman Dathan are putting forth a body of legislation to the GAE committee, I, for one, would like to see that so that we could make comment on it with you to come up with a further legislation. No, I'm sorry, you don't have a computer. Bob Godfrey, Representative Godfrey, and Representative Fishbein have their hands up.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Senator Austin. Let me just comment from 30,000 feet. This committee runs just like any other committee. In those other committees, of which I've served for several decades now, the co-chairs make decisions after consulting with the ranking members of the committee. What you're asking for is every member of this committee to comment on bill proposals. Typically, that is not done, but there are agendas that are put forward where people would vote whether to raise bills for further discussion. I don't have a problem personally sharing bill proposals with members of the committee for their input, but I would state that that is a novel approach given the way this building is operated under the 30 plus years that I've served here. I think it would be better if there was more free flow of ideas between minority and majority parties in this building. And I'm more than open to share our concepts with members of the committee for their feedback. I will have to discuss that, though, with the co-chair of this committee and the ranking members, as those are the individuals on this committee that have that authority under my understanding of how this building operates. With that, I'm going to now defer to Representative Fishbein, who had raised his hands, followed by Representative Godfrey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I first recognized that we're well outside of the agenda that's before us here today. There's certainly nothing that gave the public nor the members of this committee any notice that what was just discussed for quite a long time. In fact, I think the time period that we just took discussing that matter took longer than the real noticed meeting. So, you know, I did sit here patiently. I certainly recognize that perhaps there are questions, but there's no backup for, you know, I just heard about an accusation of being rubber stamped. I have no idea where that came from. I certainly did not receive anything accusing me of being a rubber stamp for anything. So, you know, normally when you have an agenda item, these are the issues, there's backup, and we can talk about it. So, you know, perhaps it would be appropriate for a series of questions to be submitted to LCO to answer. You know, is the Regulations Review Committee a rubber stamp for what the agency puts out? You know, so on and so forth, so that those that are looking for a shield perhaps can publish that. The other issue about fiscal notes, perhaps, and I'm certainly open to, there should be a procedure where a fiscal note can be challenged, because I've certainly been on the House floor and have explained how the law affects or is affecting a particular piece of legislation, and the House has had to recess and a fiscal note has had to be redone. Perhaps there should be a formalized procedure to do that when there is a challenge. But I'm going to defer to, well, and I do, on the contemplating legislation thing, I certainly have faith in the leadership of this committee. I would hope that at some point this committee would vote on whatever proposals are being submitted to other committees, because I think that would be the procedure if we were sitting on a regular standing committee and a different committee came to us for, let's say the leadership of the Commerce Committee came to the Judiciary Committee and they wanted some sort of legislation. Ultimately, the committee would vote on that, whether or not in a short session, whether or not to take that up. So I am open to some sort of procedure and to talk about those things. And with that, I do defer to my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Representative Fishbein. And just to clarify, we as individuals in a short session can ask committees to raise bills. Then it is up to those committees to make a vote as to whether they're going to raise those bills as committee bills and have public hearings. So the vote is actually in the receiving committee. That would be, in this instance, for changes to how we operate or clarifications to bills themselves, most likely the GAE committee. We as a committee would not vote, nor would we have to. We would respond if somebody wanted us to do something, but we have certain role that is defined, and that is to respond to proposed regulations. And it's an unusual situation in that we are responding to governmental agencies, not typically other legislators. So I just want that clarified. Representative Godfrey.
Thank you, Mr.
Sir, you've unmuted.
I'll figure this out. Yeah, I was trying to lower my hand. I hit the wrong button. My apologies. I'm very happy that Senator Austin raised these issues because I think they're very real ones, but a threshold issue, and I think Representative Fishbein brought it out, this isn't on our agenda today. And whether or not we're not observing the Freedom of Information Act as it applies to the General Assembly, and certainly as to our own joint rules as to whether or not we're taking up an issue that hasn't been noticed is a real one. And I'd like certainly I'll give LCO a minute to think about that and perhaps give us an answer. I'm happy to make a motion to change the agenda, but I'll defer to them, give them a minute to think. The lawyer part of me, the legislative intent questions that have been raised. I know that the courts look to the language of the statute. I think that's already been mentioned. Only when there's an ambiguity does it look at the so-called legislative intent, the transcripts, both in committee, in public hearings, and certainly on the floor of the House and Senate, to try and discern what the intent was. And we can be sloppy. Senator Austin was very correct on that in our drafting, that sometimes just needs a little work. That's why we come in every year. Part of the stuff we're going to be doing here in the session that begins in a few weeks is correcting some of the legislation we passed last year. The issue of the fiscal notes, I totally agree with too. I don't think agencies have the power to try and go around the appropriation process through regulation. There just needs to be just a check off, I suspect. Yes, the proposed regulation is paid for in the current budget. Yes or no? It doesn't have to go into a lot of detail necessarily for that, especially if it's a yes, it's paid for. If it's a no, we may need some kind of explanation of that. This committee doesn't have the power to raise legislation, although I've always thought it should be able to raise bills and have public hearings and all the usual stuff on the specific issue of our process as is statutorily required. So we have to go elsewhere. And I just have to observe, GAE, God bless them, but I think our rules are the joint rules are very specific in that the Legislative Management Committee is supposed to deal with these kinds of issues. And having been on it for 30 odd years, it hasn't met and raised a bill in this century. And here it is, we're 23 or 24 years, depending on how you count, in. They don't meet, they don't have debates, they don't consider legislation. Every once in a while, something that needs to be done gets tacked onto an implementer or something like that. And Representative Fishbein is absolutely right. That obscures the transparency that I think we should be involved in. My question to the chairs and ranking members, if it's appropriate, what specifically in the way of legislation are we asking for? So if anybody can answer that question, I'd be grateful.
Thank you very much, Representative Godfrey. Before we get to that, I think the first point that you raised as an ace parliamentarian is the more important one that we address first, and I would second it. So I'm going to defer now, and it's along the lines of what Representative Fishbein said as well. My natural druthers is to be accommodating and to entertain discussions, but we do have FOI constraints. We do have to give respect to the public that needs to be well informed as to what we're going to discuss. And so I am at this time deferring or moving a question to LCO. Are we restrained now from going further into this line of inquiry because it is nowhere on our agenda, was not noticed, and we have concluded the business that was on our agenda, absent just finding out if anybody missed a vote? So LCO, on that specific a priori question, I'm asking your opinion.
Yeah, technically this was not on the agenda. The discussion's gone on quite long, and so I don't know what the consequence is of really continuing it or not continuing it, but yeah, technically this was not included on the agenda. So if you think that's a good reason to, cut short this discussion, you're certainly within your rights to do so.
Well, it's certainly Senator Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. But if I'm not mistaken, this is a regular meeting. And if I'm not mistaken, at regular meetings, even if something's not on an agenda, we could add it to the agenda if we decided to, and we thought that this was in the normal course of business, an important issue to discuss. Is LCO taking the position that you can't add to a regular meeting?
You can always open the agenda, make a motion to open the agenda to add certain items. Again, I don't know if there's really any major consequence here from continuing the discussion that's already underway. But yes, technically it's not on the agenda.
Okay, so then
So if it could just go through me for the record.
yeah,
Just Senator.
Mr. Chairman, just to clear up any FOI issues and potential problems, I would vote I would make a motion to open the agenda to add this conversation to it.
And I'd be happy to second that.
Okay, so there's been a motion to open the agenda for I believe the 3 points raised by Senator Austin. Was seconded by Representative Godfrey. Is there any discussion on the motion as seconded? And I'm deferring to Madam Administrator if there's anybody. Okay, I'm going to go with Representative Carpino first, since she was in line, and then Representative Fishbein. Representative Carpino, our ranking member from the House.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate this conversation. I will tell you, of all the things I've been accused of in this building, no one has ever accused me of being a rubber stamp, by far. However, I do find these issues valid, but because of the unique issue of our committee, in my humble opinion as ranking member, I think that if the committee has concerns, that they should be addressed officially. I'm happy to work with any members of this committee, since we can submit individual proposals to do that. But if the committee is going to ask for official guidance, I do think it needs to be in writing to LCO before we go any further. I am not convinced this committee has any authority to raise bills. I may stand corrected. So any voting and reviewing I do not believe should be done in a committee capacity. But if there are legitimate questions, to the good senator's point about how we challenge fiscal notes, or perhaps ask them to be corrected, and communications with chairs of other committees, because admittedly there are bills that come through that are sloppy, that forces members of the public and lawyers out there and to have to move to legislative intent. I think we do that, but to today's end, I think formal questions should be put on paper to LCO so that we can best determine how to move forward. And again, as ranking member, I have not seen these proposals, would be happy to work with any individuals, but I don't want us to get too far ahead of ourselves. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Representative Carpino. And again, we're discussing the motion as seconded, and Representative Fishbein.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Once again, I would be looking for some clarity. I have generalities as far as what we would be discussing, whether or not we're a rubber stamp, whether or not something with fiscal notes, something with contemplating legislation. So I would be looking for some specific clarity for the record as to what this body would be taking up in expanding the agenda. I think the public is entitled to that. Also, I just wanted to a little retort, with all due respect, on the submissions. So there are submissions by individual legislators. I got that. Any individual legislator can submit to any committee anything. But then there is a distinction, which is submissions as a leader of a committee. And I think that's the distinction that I wanted to point out. If it is intended, and I don't know, I mean, I'm new to the committee, so sometimes I bring things to the table that people haven't heard before. But if it's intended that a submission goes to GAE under the auspices of our leadership, I think that we should be a part of that. Now, granted, if the letter says, the names of the leadership, maybe hint, hint, the receiving committee recognizes that it comes from those people that lead that committee. I got that. But I think there is a distinction when it comes under one title, that being a senator or state representative, and the other title, that being chairman or ranking member of a particular committee. And I think that's where we as a team should be a part of. So I defer once again. Thank you.
Okay, is there anybody else that wants just and a little bit of the cat out of the bag? My colleague, Chairman Dathan, did submit an idea to try to help clarify what we do on this committee last session. And we tried to discuss it with Representative Blumenthal, the House co-chair of GAE. And it really didn't get, my understanding is it didn't get out of committee. And it was just by virtue of the fact that Representative Dathan was co-chair of the committee and felt like the process needed to have some clarification. I personally, on this, I agree with those that said perhaps we should get it in writing, but we're bumping up against the time frame it's going to sail right into the next legislative session. So I don't have a problem with open and transparent discussions today. But I do think that reducing it to writing to let LCO opine would be probably more productive. As far as what we as co-chairs and perhaps the ranking members would consider asking another committee to raise as a bill to help us out, I think that it would be helpful given the amount of experience and the bipartisan nature of this committee for everybody to see it and comment on it so that we get the best ultimate product. And it would only help it to get its passage if we all did it together. But to Chairman Dathan, would you like to comment on the idea that you had in the last legislative session that didn't make it forward? And then we can vote on whether to open up the agenda right now today.
Okay, thank you so much, Chairman Kissel. Just wanted to let folks know that, we do have a lot of regulations in our state. Some are outdated, and really, don't make sense anymore. And I do think we need to have a look and make sure that the regulations that we do have are good and poignant for what we're trying to do with legislative intent. So one of the bills that we were looking at last year is having a review process over regulations that are out there. I do agree, as I had said earlier, about we really need to ensure that within this committee that we are doing things within legislative intent, and that we do ensure that the regulations that are putting forward do conform to what our budget and approved budget has within it, whether it's for one agency or several agencies that are affected by a certain regulation. And I would like to see that regulations that do affect multiple agencies, that we do see comments from those agencies to ensure that it is in sync with the legislative intent of the original legislation. So just want to echo your comments. I do think it would be very productive if we had everything in writing, so that LCO could opine on this, so that we can be efficient going forward. It is a short legislative session, and I know that the GAE committee probably has a number of things on its plate. But I have been in discussions with the leadership there on some of these ideas in the past, and we will be bringing them forward again. So thank you, Chairman Kissel.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion on the motion before us? Okay, Madam Administrator, if you could just please call the roll on whether we should open the agenda to continue discussing the three matters raised by Senator Austin.
Regarding opening the agenda, Representative Dathan,
Yes.
Senator Kissel, Representative Carpino,
No, ma'am.
Senator Maroney, Representative Arnone, Senator Chicarella, Representative Fishbein.
Representative Fishbein votes no. I don't even know that we have a quorum, but
Yeah, I was just going to ask the quorum question. People have dropped out.
I was going to drop out after I voted and not knowing that we were going to have this discussion.
Sorry, I interrupted a roll call. I apologize.
Representative Godfrey, did you?
Yes.
Senator Hartley, Senator Kelly, Representative Claritas Detria, Representative McGuirty,
I'm a no.
Senator Austin, Representative Ryan,
Yes.
we do have a quorum, and there's more yays.
Yes. I see a hand over from our LCO attorney.
Nick Bombay, LCO. I do want to be very clear about the committee's authority to approve, disapprove, or reject regulations. There are no qualifications beyond those. You are not required to vote any particular way. If we make a recommendation or if a statute confers the authority upon an agency to adopt regulations. You can vote your conscience on any regulation that comes before you, and we simply make a recommendation based on the legal sufficiency and the drafting of those regulations. In terms of fiscal notes, the statutes are pretty clear as it is now. Fiscal notes are supposed to be prepared by agencies, keeping the entire state in mind, not just their agency. And then the Office of Fiscal Analysis does review those fiscal notes, and if they find that there are any errors in them, they will prepare a memo and provide them, as they did in the case of the nursing regs that we discussed earlier.
I very much appreciate that. Senator Austin.
Thank you. I think that from my perspective, we had a lengthy discussion. I can certainly put things in writing. I think that Attorney Bombay put on the record a couple of things relative to the fiscal notes and relative to our ability to vote our conscience. I think that that's important for us to look at. I have strong concerns about legislative intent, and I will send that to the committee at large. And I would appreciate any bills that are going forward, that whether or not they're going forward on an individual basis or not, that if it's relevant to this committee and how it is run, I would appreciate a copy of that. I may or may not also co-sponsor such a bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Austin, and your points are all well taken. I can't speak for Chairman Dathan, but again, my view is that if we all work together, so any ideas that Chairman Dathan and myself or the ranking members have, or frankly, anybody on this committee as to how to better operate as the Regulations Review Committee of this legislature, or more transparency or more direction to various state agencies, I would welcome all of that. Because of the time frame, I know that Chairman Dathan and myself will hop right on this so that we start sharing this information.
Godfrey has his hand up online.
I'm sorry, who does? Oh, Representative Godfrey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since we just learned that there's always what the statutory requirements for fiscal notes are, perhaps if we just ask OFA to make as a part of their analysis, their check and balance on the agency, to just have a check off, yes, this is paid for in the current budget, or no, it's not, and then an explanation why. So I suspect we don't need a statutory change for that piece, and that would I think be a way of clarifying what's already happening, and certainly as part of the transparency of the whole process. The other thing someone mentioned, I apologize, I can't remember who, about public comment. Every once in a while, we need to take a look at the Uniform Administrative Procedures Act, which is the process by which regulations are proposed by state agencies and come to us. And there's extensive requirements for public input on that. So that's another thing that probably already exists, although if it needs any tightening up, perhaps LCO, working with the chairs and ranking members, can advise us on that. And then the last thing, time is short. Even if we're looking at having standing committees of the legislature raise a bill on our behalf, deadlines for raising bills are just a few weeks away. We go in on the 7th. Individuals cannot propose legislation this year except dealing with specific line items in the budget. LCO has been very clear on that, and remembering that the constitutional requirement for the short session is based in being budgetary, although obviously committees can raise other bills. So it's only if there is a request to an appropriate committee. I'm not sure if it's GAE or general law who does the UAPA. We can find that out easily enough to see if there's any repercussions to that act. And again, I think the idea of being able to know in writing exactly what is being proposed, so we can consider it, and I can put on my lawyer hat. I'm happy to help the chairs and ranking members or whoever else is involved to begin to put this together. So, just let me know. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Godfrey. So what I heard, there's a lot of great ideas there, but the one idea about just asking fiscal analysis to just check a box, I think that would solve one of the issues raised by Senator Austin. So I'm now going to just ask, can our LCO staff just ask them to do that so that we don't have to jump through a million hoops just to get that done?
I don't really want to answer on behalf of OFA, but I'm sure that you can communicate with Neil Ayers about how they can approach their review of fiscal notes by agencies on regulations.
So I'm gathering that I will make an inquiry on your behalf.
Sure will.
Okay, thank you. Anything else at this point in time? And it seems like we've got our work cut out for us in the next week to 10 days to share ideas. But we're all in this together. That's why this committee was designed to have chairs of different parties and be balanced right down the middle. And so, Senator Austin, do we have a course of action that you're okay with?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Senator. Any other discussion on this or any other matter today? Seeing none, Madam Administrator, could you just see if anybody missed a vote on any of the proposals we had before us?
No one present missed any votes.
Okay. At this point in time, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Moved.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye,
Aye.
aye. You're adjourned. Have a great day, everybody.
Happy New Year.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.